Hi, Libra Sun and Rising. Welcome to your January 2023 Astro Update. It's Rena here. Well, here we are, a new year. And yet we have a couple of personal planets that are retrograding. So that fresh energy of the new year, we probably will feel that to some degree, but really feeling the momentum and the change will probably come in the third week of January. And I'll explain that in a minute, but I also want to talk about what planets are retrograding and which houses they are in for Libra. So, of course, this is a general forecast. You have to see your actual natal chart, or if you're listening for your sun in Libra, that's going to depend on your degree of Libra sun. So just take this as a general forecast. So one of the planets that has been retrograding for a couple of months now has been Mars. And it is in fellow air sign Gemini. And for you, this is the ninth house, which is Sag's domain. So there's been this wanderlust with Libra. Now, something might have happened where your plans to travel were not realized. And this could have been since the end of October when Mars went retrograde, maybe even earlier than that in the shadow period. So you could be chomping at the bit to travel, and yet, the ninth house ultimately is about expansion, and there's also mental expansion. So this is also the house of higher education. For some of you, that might have involved studying abroad. And even though Mars is a very physical, active kind of a sign, I still think it could be, related to your ambitions being thwarted in some way. And then you add Mercury to the mix, even though it's not in the same area, and you get even more frustration, feelings of being contained in that sense and kept back. So just know that both of these planets are going direct in the month of January. Mars turns direct at 8 degrees of Gemini on the 12th, and Mercury turns direct at 8 degrees of Capricorn on the 18th. The number 8, isn't that interesting with both of these planets? The number 8 is a number of worldly power. And actually, I have a video on the universal year of 2023, which is a 7 universal year, which is more about the contemplative side of life. A lot of people might say, oh, great, more solitude and contemplation, like we haven't had that already. But actually, when it's coming from the outside in, when it's forced on people, that's a whole different animal. It's when you decide to do it yourself. And Libra people are very social people, so that's not necessarily the easiest thing for a Libra person to do. Okay, but let's talk about the first thing that's coming up here. We have a full moon at 16 degrees of Cancer on the 6th of the month during these retrogrades. This is going to happen in your 10th house of career. So the Mercury retrograde is actually happening in your 4th house of home and family. And this is where Pluto has taken up residence for the last 15 years. And Pluto's going into fellow sign Aquarius in March. So that's going to be a significant shift. It's going to go back into Capricorn later on, because Pluto, it's not going very far into Aquarius in 2023. I will admit that, and it will go back into that 4th house. So basically, now that we're in the last degrees of Pluto in Capricorn. This is where the rubber meets the road, when those lessons really get distilled, okay, of home and family. The past 15 years for Libra people, whether it's your sun sign, your ascendant, might have been quite rocky as it pertains to home matters. Maybe even your physical property in some cases, but definitely the home that you have, the family that you have created, but also your family of origin. And some of you may have even done some inner work as it pertains to your childhood, because the fourth house can represent that. And Libra is one of those signs that I feel the shadow is something that makes you supremely uncomfortable. And part of that is because Libra people tend to be very decent people. They tend to be very kind. If you are inauthentic, it's not because you're trying to deceive anyone. It's just because you're trying to please them. And yes, there is that need for validation, for acceptance that is driving that. I'm not saying it's just completely altruistic, but it's not coming from a really like a mean negative place. It's coming from maybe insecurity in some instances, but definitely I think the Libra people that I've met overall have been decent people, maybe a bit imbalanced, because Libra is about balance, and when you're not balanced, you might be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, you might be. But in any case, this Pluto is about going beneath the surface. That's why, Pluto is one of the rulers of Scorpio, the 8th house. And this can be about shadow work. And shadow work is simply excavating all of the uncomfortable emotions and experiences that people tend to shove under the rug because they don't want to consciously deal with them. And, the 8th house is also connected to trauma. So obviously, uncomfortable is mild on that spectrum, something that's traumatic. The person can't deal with it. And in the infinite wisdom of the body-mind complex, there is that ability to kind of, the very nature of shoving things under the rug actually serves a therapeutic purpose, so that we don't get overloaded with all kinds of emotions that we can't process in that moment. The problem is that then the person doesn't integrate this, and it's kind of operating under the surface. And with people who are trying to be nice, how this can come out is a lot of the rage or the grief that can get very distorted. The person can project onto others. It's a whole thing. I don't want to get into that. But psychotherapy is shadow work. I've realized that. It's a form of it. But the thing is that for some people, you have to find some therapist who's willing to really go there. And I would say probably like a Jungian therapist, or somebody who is really equipped to deal with things like on the spiritual level, to do what I'm talking about. I'm not saying other types of therapists can't help people psychologically as well. I'm talking about just when I use the term shadow work. But in any case, these kinds of things may have come up for you, and you have sought therapy or other healing modalities. And you also had Saturn here until about 2020 for a few years, like from the end of 2017 through 2020. And that might have caused issues within the family. And in some cases, some of you have had to stand up to your mother, or some people think the fourth house is the father. I would just say the parents or family of origin. because maybe you were a pushover and you didn't have boundaries. So all of these things can be coming to a head. Now, with the full moon in Cancer in the 10th house of career, this is that opposite house. And this could be something like a promotion. Um, but for some of you, and I'm going to say a woman because women give birth, but certainly a man can make this choice as well, regardless. Not to give birth, but the other stuff. You may have finally committed to having a child, and or maybe you're actually getting pregnant. The fifth house is supposed to be conceiving children, but I could see the fourth house being connected to that as well. And so, like, let's say a woman, a female Libra woman is in her 30s, maybe late 20s into her 30s, maybe even 40, and has so far avoided children. And she starts to do that work uh, regarded to regarding childhood issues, and realizes that that was one of the big reasons why she didn't want to have children, is because she had unhealed wounds in that area, but she's always really wanted that. And maybe she embraces this idea and decides to go ahead, and this is you um, letting go of your career so that you can be a stay-at-home mother. Like I said, a man can be a stay-at-home father. And it's like a big deal because Libra is a masculine cardinal sign. So Libra people do tend to be ambitious, even though they wield a velvet glove. They're not necessarily cutthroat, but they still are very ambitious. So that could be a big turning point for you. For other people, this can simply be a promotion, or maybe you're leaving a certain type of profession, but you're not leaving the workforce. Um, this could put your name in lights. I mean, whether it's outright fame or just recognition in your field. On the 12th, as I stated, Mars turns direct in Gemini. So something may be resolved as it pertains to travel or higher education, or any kind of ambition that you're pursuing that has a spiritual theme to it. On the 18th, Mercury turns direct at 8 degrees of Capricorn in that fourth house of home and family. So that's where you've been kind of tossing around these ideas with this Mercury retrograde. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of like with the another interesting thing about that full moon in Cancer is that Cancer is the ruler of the fourth house of home and family. So that might have even more connection to starting a family or raising a family. Sometimes even if you already have children, you might say, you know what, because of what happened with the shutdown, a lot of people, like just about everybody had to work from home. And I would look around town and I would see families biking together. Where I live, there probably are a lot of people who already worked from home anyhow, because it's just like kind of a family oriented area. But still, I felt so happy for the kids, because they were with their parents. And sometimes, these days, a lot of times that wasn't what was happening. So because we're kind of transitioning back into so-called reality, which is a joke, it's not, nothing is ever going to be the same as it was before. Even if it looks that way on the surface, it just isn't. And I remember when I heard other people say that, I remember going, oh my God, I'm sure some of you were like me, where you're like, why can't things just go back to how they used to be? Even though I'm consider myself spiritually aware, just this craziness, this, that we live with all the time, that's kind of indescribable, because it does seem like normal. That's why it's like the Twilight Zone, if you've ever seen those episodes where everything seems normal on the surface, but there's all these bizarre things that are still happening, even on the, energetic level with differing attitudes on things. So, um, it's one of those things where sometimes people realize, oh, I thought that was what I wanted, but I realize nothing, that ship has already sailed, and I really want to be with my kids. I maybe even homeschooling for some of you. There's so many possibilities, but that's kind of like interesting that the full moon is in your that it's in Cancer, because that relates to your opposite house, and well, the opposite house in astrology. Um, on the 20th, the sun goes into Aquarius. So the sun is going into this area that has to do with love. I mean, it's really right up your alley, Libra. Creativity, love, and fun. It's the house of pleasure. It's Leo's domain. So tapping into your inner child, parties. And this is happening after these personal planets go direct. So you may feel like this. What came into my mind was a weight being lifted, but that might be a little bit, melodramatic. It might feel a lot lighter, um, for you. But yeah, a weight being lifted, because the fourth house squares you off, and it's also this water house. And Libra is an air sign, so water energy can might feel kind of oppressive even at times, because you might feel like you're being dragged down instead of like that air, which is kind of ethereal, floating around up there. The next day we have a new moon at 1 degree of Aquarius. Yes, technically this is your fifth house. But depending on other factors, this might actually be your fourth house where this is showing up. And if so, there might be some kind of issue with real estate, even with the Mercury retrograde. If you were trying to sell a house, yeah, I mean, it could be something along those lines, that something got mucked up. So this might be the time when things are going forward, and maybe you are getting a new home, but new developments with family issues. If it's in your fifth house, it's going to be like love coming into your life. um, I'm going to be doing a video about Pluto going into the different houses for people. And for you, Pluto is going into your fifth house. So let me just say this, give you a little heads up, because maybe this is the time when that person comes into your life. Um, really watch out for anyone who comes into your life if you're like looking for love and they are very domineering, because Pluto can be control. And the problem is, because this is kind of like a scorpionic type of person, it could be a literal Scorpio. And because some of you sun sign Libras may have Venus in Scorpio, Mars in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio, one of those, you may be attracted to that type of energy on some level, or maybe your moon is in Scorpio, who knows? But you might be attracted to it, but it's one of those things where people who are I was going to say stalkers, and I'm not even making light of it, but people like that who are very obsessive, they have an uncanny ability to read people's psyches, so they can kind of understand what makes people tick, and that makes them very dangerous. So, and I'm not just saying like dangerous at the ultimate level, but just like where they can get inside somebody's head very easily, or their emotional self. So be very careful about, people who come, they might come to you, and you might think that they are um, the perfect specimen, but they might be hiding something else. So in other words, don't get too caught up in any kind of like the fun that you're involved in. Always be discerning. Don't move too fast with anyone. Vet people, get to know them just on the platonic level, because if you get physical with somebody quickly, that can kind of, you know, obscure things too. So just a little bit of a hint about what that reading's going to be about. Um, on the 22nd, Uranus turns direct at 1456 Taurus, almost 15 degrees of Taurus. And for you, this is the 8th house. And the 8th house is kind of a weird one for Uranus. Definitely anything, maybe you were trying to study astrology. Uranus is associated with astrology, so is the 8th house. Any kind of occult studies. But this might be more in terms of psychic phenomena that is really off the wall. Uranus is very intuitive, but it's very much um, associated with like galactic information, which is becoming more and more mainstream, I feel. However, even with that kind of information, there are channelings that people have to be discerning about, where the Galactic Federation, all these things that they're saying that they're from, and you know we can be infiltrated. The spiritual community can and is being infiltrated by disinfo from all possible angles. So it's so important to be discerning about this. Now that Uranus is direct, maybe, if you've been having some strange experiences, they won't be as uh, often and as strange. I don't know. But I think the 8th house can be like other people's finances. So if you are, well, I know they can be. So if your partner has been, if you like live with or are married to someone, their finances affect you, and maybe they have been experiencing a lot of fluctuations with their finances. So this might steady that for, to some degree. Okay, that's what I have for you, Libra. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, I'm promoting my double readings because they are a really good value. 1 hour of natal chart analysis, 1 hour of transits for 2023 at a special price. I do offer those readings separately because some people don't really want one or don't want both. They want one or the other, so just know that. And I have another package deal called the Whole Enchilada, which is an hour of either natal chart analysis or transits with a full-length tarot reading. Both the first one that I described is called Deep Dive Reading. You can find out more information at the link below. Thank you for listening, and Happy New Year. Bye.